Hey guys, it's Megan Aller, a sales executive in Denver, Colorado for First American Title Insurance Company. This is going to be your Metro Denver market review for the numbers that came out for November of 2018. One of the major headlines that we're watching right now in the Denver Post, as well as on 24/7/9 and Fox News, is that inventory is up in Metro Denver. And it's important that you understand that our reports that you can review in Metro Denver, there's several different ones and you should look at all of them. There's DMAR, there's RE Colorado, this report, and my report's a little bit different than the other ones because I only cover the 7 Metro Denver counties. We're all trending fairly in line with each other, though, when it comes to checking out what's happening with our inventory. So what I wanted to cover with you today is the difference between horizontal versus vertical shift. When you're looking at a graph, there's an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis runs across the bottom of the graph and y runs across the side on the left-hand side of your computer screen. When we're looking at horizontal shift, we're looking at shift along the x-axis where we're talking about difference in time. When there's a shift on the horizontal axis, that means that we're seeing some seasonal transitions, and 2018 showed a lot of seasonal transition since our market went up higher, faster, sooner. Not the first time you've heard me say that this year. So when interest rates started to go up back in January, that shifted a lot of our buyer pool earlier into 2018. So that means that we have kind of a hangover that's happening for the last few months of the year that's making our inventory go up. We're in a funky position because last November was the lowest November on record in this 6-year cycle for inventory, and this November is the highest. So what happens when you compare the lowest to the highest in this cycle, it reports as a 28.6% increase in inventory in the market. But when we look at the average across the entire market for each one of those Novembers for the last 6 years, we're actually only up by about 100 units from where we should be. So we rounded out November with 5,167 detached single-family units in the marketplace, which at the end of the day isn't really different than where we've been for the rest of the Novembers in this cycle. Average days on market held at 31 average days to contract, which was the exact same as last month. Median days to contract was up from 14 to 18. Not a huge jump, but it's anticipated, and that's exactly where we should be for November. Close to list price ratios continue to drop, and this represents the lowest close to list price ratio, indicating that buyers have more negotiating power during October, November, and December, and buyers should be in the market taking advantage of that. Flash sales, or the units that were under contract in that first 7-day period, were also down. We came down to 30.5%. Again, that number continues to decline until we get into February when the market starts to pick up again. So we've been talking a lot about shift and inventory going up, and we can't talk about supply without also talking about demand. So again, behind me, you can see the seasonal nature of our market. Blue is active, yellow is under contract, red is closed. And it's not just inventory that's gone up, but we also have some shifting that's happening with under contract and sold as well. So we've got some different graphs to take a closer look at this. The way that you read this for market conditions watching for shift, these blue bars represent active listings. On the first graph that you're looking at on the left side of your screen, that one represents what we can expect for how those inventory, that unit, will change over that entire year. Now, as we go into October, November, and December, you can see that inventory is anticipated to decline. Now, if we look at that month-over-month transition for all of the Novembers, which is the graph on the right, we're looking at an average of a 16.8% decline as we transition from October to November. This year we came down by 14.7%, so we're pretty close to where we're supposed to be. Again, keep in mind that since we're reporting the year-over-year transition is up between 25 to 30% year-over-year, but when we look at the entire year averaged out, we're only up by about 100 units when we look at those November numbers, okay? Now, we also have to take a look at what's happening with under contract units because we have to report what's happening with demand because prices are determined by the relationship between supply and demand. When we're looking at under contract units, typically our pool of potential buyers is largest when we're looking at those months for April and May. By the time that we hit June, the buyer pool is starting to taper off as buyers fatigue and start to enjoy their summer leisure months here in Denver, Colorado. As we go from from October to November, typically what we expect to see is about an 18 to a 19% decline in the number of contracts written. This year it came down by 15.1%. However, when we look at the average over the entire 6-year cycle, the yellow bar represents the average from number of contracts written from 2013 to 2017, and the blue bar represents 2018. Now, in November, if we look at the average and we compare it to what happened this year, we're actually up in terms of contracts written. So what happens when inventory goes down and demand remains relatively consistent? Lo and behold, we maintain appreciation rates, okay? So again, the month supply of inventory is the best way to look at the relationship between supply and demand. When we're looking at these graphs, again, the dark blue bars is the average from 2013 to 2017. The light blue bar is what happened in 2018. We were well below the anticipated month supply of inventory all the way up until September. In September, we had a bit more activity. We think that that's due to the midterm election cycle and some of the more controversial amendments that we're looking at being passed. And then back down in November, we're back down below where we should be anticipating. So when I hear people talking about shift and that it's trending towards a buyer's market, while that technically is true, I think that it's misleading to the consumer. What we can say is, and I think the technical term that I've settled on is, it was a less good couple of months in a row. But 1 or 2 months does not make a trend, and you can see that by November that we're back down below where we should be. If that number remains low, price appreciation continues to drive upwards. If you're concerned about a bubble bursting or the relationship between supply and demand and what we would need to create a balanced market, on this graph that shows units for balance, the blue bar represents what we have, and the red bar represents what we would need to have that 6-month supply of inventory that would create equilibrium. So as you can see, again, we had 5,100, 5,200 units available for sale. We would need to have around 15,570 active units. So again, we only have about 33% of what we need to offset demand. So stay tuned for next week's report. I'll cover all of the attached changes for you in Metro Denver. Thanks so much for tuning in. And again, I hope that if I can help you better advise your buyers and sellers in the market, that we might have the opportunity to meet them here at First American's Closing Tables. Thanks so much, guys.